Good morning to you all, particularly to Archbishop Costello, Bishop Sproxton, principals, teachers and students. You're very welcome here at Arranmore Catholic College this morning. Before I start, can I please acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people, their elders past, present and future, on whose traditional lands we gather today. Our college has been here for over 100 years, and we are a school established in the tradition of the Mercy Sisters and the Christian Brothers. So I'd warmly welcome you here today. My last little function is just to point out that the ladies is that way, the gentlemen in that corner just around there, and there's water bubblers just behind that wall. So I do hope you have an excellent day, and I'm sure it will be very productive. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you this morning, for you to have the opportunity as well to come and to be with us, the Archbishop and myself, and after morning tea to have the opportunity of raising questions that you might have about LifeLink, about any other questions that you might have as well. I was reading this morning on one of our news services that Pope Francis says that we need to listen to the young people, reminding us of that very important way in which we listen to the questions and the issues that the young people are facing today, and doing our best to respond to those things. But I'd just like to address, just for a few moments, the reason why we're here today, and to acknowledge the presence of the Archbishop and those others involved in LifeLink who have come to assist us today. Firstly, the Archbishop and I would sincerely like to thank Arranmore Catholic College for hosting our forum today, and to Declan Tenham, who welcomed us just a few moments ago, the principal of Arranmore College, for his warm words of welcome. I'm delighted to advise that, as well as being filmed this morning, so everyone in your school, and especially those few schools unable to attend today, can share in this special event in support of the LifeLink Day 2018. I'd like to acknowledge as well our special guests, Mrs. Diana Altieri, Team Leader of Religious Education Faith Formation Team of Catholic Education Western Australia, who is officially representing Dr. Deborah Sayes, the Acting Executive Director of Catholic Education. As you know, Catholic Education WA is a much valued partner in our LifeLink Day activities each year, and we are indeed grateful for this support. I'd also like to welcome to our forum today the financial administrators from around Australia joining us, Greg Russo from the Archdiocese of Perth, Andrew Neville, Archdiocese of Adelaide, Father Stephen Hackett from the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference, Francis Moore, the Archdiocese of Melbourne, Glenn Mowbray, also from the Australian Bishops' Conference, Helen Delahunty of the Archdiocese of Canberra and Goulburn, Jeremy Howes, the Archdiocese of Brisbane, Michael Diggs, the Archdiocese of Sydney, and Ron Ward from the Archdiocese of Hobart. You're all most welcome. And a very special welcome to all of you here today, representatives from 25 secondary schools from across the Archdiocese of Perth. We're delighted that you have made the time to join us. So before we begin, I'd like to commence proceedings with a prayer. A prayer for charity. God of mercy and compassion, we praise you for your goodness. May your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Fill us with the spirit of loving service as we recognise in those we meet the face of Jesus, your Son. Through the generous work of our Lifelink welfare agencies, may burdens be lifted from the shoulders of your people, and may they feel the warmth of your kindness and love. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. So, what is Lifelink? Why was it started? What does it do? And whom do we help? Many of these questions are answered in our Welcome to Lifelink video, which many of you have already seen. But if you haven't, I'd like to share a short edited version of this with you now.
Welcome everybody. Lifelink was established by the Archdiocese of Perth in 1994 as the unifying name under which the many welfare and social service agencies established or supported by the Church would be funded and promoted. A number of our agencies have served people in need within communities throughout Western Australia for more than 30 years and are well known. Organisations such as Centrecare, Identity WA and Centrecare Employment and Training. The Shopfront, Day Dawn and Emmaus community organisations were established more recently to meet emerging needs identified within the community. Each agency or service, funded or supported through Lifelink, represents an essential part of the Church's mission to reach out to those in need and in doing so, express faith in a direct and tangible manner. As you all know, as Catholics, we believe that it is through service to others that we see and experience the true face of Jesus. Pope Francis expressed this when he said, "It is not only in what we believe and what we say, but in what we do, that we come to fully know and understand the message of love which Jesus brought to the world." Just as Jesus walked with and reached out to the poor, the lonely, the isolated and the abused, we too are called upon to give concrete expression to our faith through our active service to others. Through the wonderful work of our Lifelink agencies, we bear witness to and are a vital part of engaging with people who reach out to us for help. I hope you enjoy this informational video.
Lifelink is not a welfare organisation, it is the fundraising and promotional arm for the many welfare agencies and services established by the Archdiocese of Perth. Lifelink currently provides funding support to the following agencies and organisations established or supported by the Church: Catholic Ministry for people who are deaf or hearing impaired, Catholic Outreach, Centrecare Employment and Training, Centrecare Incorporated, Juraminda, Day Dawn Advocacy Centre, Emmanuel Centre, Emmaus Community, Identity WA, Samaritan Projects, The Shopfront.
Whilst it may not always be obvious, there are thousands of people who desperately need our help right here in Perth and throughout WA.
Lifelink Catholic caring agencies reach out to more than 34,000 Western Australian families and individuals in need each year. By providing services and respite care to individuals, families and children with physical or intellectual disability. By offering safe refuge and assistance for women and children escaping domestic abuse or violence. Providing emergency housing, skills training for the unemployed, food and support for the homeless, and caring homes for people battling mental health conditions.
The shopfront started in 2001. I went to see Archbishop Hickey about the problem we had with all the homeless people and looking for help. And so he told me, why don't you go and start a shopfront? So the shopfront first is a drop-in centre, and they get lovely volunteers who are warm and welcoming to greet them. But it's also a referral. So also then if you're homeless or you're looking for assistance, the shopfront networks with a wide group of people so that they can provide emergency assistance for people who are in need. Last year, 25,000 people came through Shopfront. People can help by donating to Shopfront financially. Other people may say, look, we'd like to help with blankets or canned drives. So people can help in many ways, and all of it is really, really appreciated. Most recently of someone, a lady that we were able to help who needed some assistance for Christmas presents, and just seeing that family and the joy and the love that they experienced by receiving the gifts of Christmas presents. And then her children were so excited when, you know, I went to see them. Oh, she's come with gifts. And they asked me, please eat with us, please share with us. Thank you for the love you've shown us. And that to me is repeated again and again to all these people who come to receive a touch of love. I think it's really important to recognise the amazing work that all our parishes do to support Shopfront. Most of our volunteers come directly from the parishes. They give up their time to come and support those who are in need. And without the parishes and the support from our parishes, Shopfront would not be the warm, welcoming and caring place it is.
Emmaus started in 1996 when I was working in a crisis unit. People were coming into the crisis unit and were coming back to the crisis unit constantly. I prayed and asked the Lord to give us a property where we could have long-term independent community living. The benefits of community living are that people in the long term become family. Our mission statement is that every person created by God deserves to love and be loved, to be respected and to be taken seriously. This is what we strive for, especially with people who live with mental health issues. Our basis is the Jesus message. It's simple, yet radical. It's about love. If our community grows, it will be in love. It's not for profit, it's for the love of our brothers and sisters. If Emmaus didn't exist, I guess the people would be living in hostels. The difference between a hostel and Emmaus is a hostel is accommodation. We're here, it's a home, and that's what we're striving for anyway. If I had a message regarding how people should treat people with mental health issues, it's the same as treating someone with diabetes or cancer. So the message would be that we are all connected, we are all brothers and sisters, and love. Love is the message. I can't even tell you how strongly I feel and this community feels about this message. People can support us by supporting LifeLink because we're part of a web of agencies that help our brothers and sisters. And if people feel in their heart, how can I do this? And I want to do something here, support LifeLink because it does go straight to the source, believe me. And it has helped in so many ways here. And other agencies. I'm friends with other agencies and it helps many people.
Each year, LifeLink supported agencies deliver more than $50 million of professional programs, caring services, qualified personnel and resources for the benefit of the Western Australian community.
Thankfully, much of this funding is provided through various state and federal government grants and service contracts. However, to ensure our agencies are appropriately funded, the Church through LifeLink provides more than $1.2 million in direct funding each and every year. In addition to the substantial assistance the Church already provides with buildings and properties utilised by these welfare agencies. Lifelink's mission, its purpose, is to raise this required $1.2 million through my annual fundraising appeals and with the enthusiastic support of Catholic schools in this Archdiocese on Lifelink Day.
More information about Lifelink, photos, articles and teaching resources are now available on our new website. Please visit us at www.lifelink.com.au.
Thank you for taking the time to learn more about Lifelink and the work of our social service agencies. It's up to all of us to help make a difference. Let us reach out with generosity, with compassion and with love when someone asks us for help.
So we've heard in our video that Lifelink agencies reach out to help more than 34,000 Western Australians in need each year. Sometimes I think that the message behind this number can get lost. So to put this into some perspective, 34,000 people is the equivalent of the entire populations of Sampson, Cardinia, Willagee, Murdoch, Coolbalup and Hamilton Hill. So let's talk about Lifelink Day. The Archbishop's Lifelink Day initiative for Catholic schools started in 1998. The core objectives of the Archbishop's Lifelink Day for schools are to promote understanding of the Church's response to people in need within our community, to instil in Catholic students attending our archdiocesan schools a sense of responsibility for those less fortunate, to provide education and information of the work undertaken by the Lifelink social service agencies in helping many thousands of Western Australian families and individuals in need each year, and to encourage a practical demonstration of faith by asking students, teachers and schools to organise a special fundraising event for Lifelink Day, with the proceeds aiding people in real need within our community. Since inception, Lifelink Day has been warmly embraced by our Catholic schools. We are indeed grateful for the enthusiastic support of Catholic Education WA, and especially of the principals, the teachers and students throughout the Archdiocese. Secondary schools have held fetes, free dress days, sports carnivals, walkathons, dances, international food days, and all manner of fun events which have been highly successful fundraising activities. I'm delighted to report that collectively Catholic primary and secondary schools have raised more than $1.8 million to support Lifelink Day. And every dollar has been directed to the service and care of people in need in the community. This is a remarkable achievement and you're to be congratulated on your efforts. Last year, I am delighted to say that our primary and secondary schools raised $127,280 and actually exceeded our fundraising goal. So again, thank you all for your outstanding generosity. I think we need to give ourselves a round of applause. Well done. The Archbishop and I hope that this year we will once again join together and raise even more in this special year of youth, which the Archbishop will speak on during his address. Whilst Lifelink Day is officially launched on Wednesday the 6th of June this year, your school may undertake its fundraising activity anytime during the school year. To help you to celebrate and to share Lifelink Day in your school, we will provide a number of resources. These will be uploaded to our Lifelink website during the coming weeks. From the Secondary School Resources button on the homepage, you'll have access to 2 videos of our forum today, an hour video of these presentations, and a 90-minute video of a Q&A session, which will follow later this morning. And these will be split into 2 by 45-minute sessions. Teachers will be able to access these in class to share with the students. There'll be PDF copies of the Lifelink Day poster, which will be delivered to your school, and information on our Lifelink agencies with contact details. Samples of our Lifelink and Lifelink Day logos, should you wish to use them, are there as well. And there are photos representing the work of our Lifelink agencies. So, thank you again. Thank you so much for your time this morning, and sincere thanks for your continuing support of Lifelink Day. I hope you enjoy today's forum, and whatever fundraising event your school may hold this year, I wish you every success. Thank you. So it's my pleasure now to introduce and invite Archbishop Timothy Costello to present his key address.
Thank you, Bishop Don, very much, and good morning, everyone. It's great to be here, as always, and to have this chance to spend some time with you. I'm just going to take my jacket off. It's getting a bit warm, so I hope you don't mind if I go a bit casual. Bishop Sproxton mentioned at the start of his address that he was reading one of our website publications this morning. I read the same website and was struck by the same article where Pope Francis said that it's really important for the church and for the leaders in the church to listen to young people. And of course, that's part of the reason why we have this gathering every year, partly so that you can listen to me and Bishop Sproxton and Diana Altieri this year, but also so that we can listen to you. And after morning tea, you'll have a chance to throw at Bishop Don and I any questions that you want to. I should say Bishop Don and me, got to get my grammar right. Any questions that you want to. A few weeks ago, I attended a function in the parish at Lockridge, and it was part of our response here in the Archdiocese of Perth to this decision of the Bishops of Australia, the Catholic Bishops of Australia, to hold a special year for youth, which is this year, 2018. We're holding it this year because it happens to be 10 years since World Youth Day in Sydney, and we wanted to mark that remarkable occasion when so many hundreds of thousands of young people from all around the world gathered in Sydney together with Pope Benedict for World Youth Day. It was such a big event that we don't want to lose it, and so 10 years later we thought we'd have a big celebration, and having a year for youth is part of that celebration. I'm going to talk just a little bit about that a little later in this address, but first I wanted to just share with you some of the thoughts that I shared with the young people who gathered in Lockridge a few weeks ago. So I want to use the topic of that talk and some of the ideas I presented at that talk with you this morning, and I hope it will make sense to you. The topic that I addressed might sound a bit strange, but this is the topic. It was, love the church, ? You've got to be joking. Love the church, you've got to be joking. That's what I wanted to talk to you about this morning. I've got some fairly heavy things to say, so it's early in the morning, you won't be too tired yet, hopefully, so you'll have to work with me and come with me as I try and spell out why I've used that title and what I'm trying to get at by talking about it. One of the reasons why I chose a title that's a bit provocative, and I think a lot of older Catholics would be a bit surprised that a bishop would even begin that way, is that I think that the Catholic Church as an institution, and most of us, not all of us, but most of us here belong to the Catholic Church, is an institution that the Catholic Church would be an institution that we actually care about and even more love, might seem a strange idea, maybe even a stupid idea, a ridiculous idea to many people, and maybe to many of you. Maybe it's never occurred to you that the Church, the Catholic Church, is something or a group of people that you're supposed to love, or that you might even be able to love. There are all kinds of reasons why people would think that this idea is a very strange one. And just before I go on, I just noticed up there people taking photos, and it reminds me that we're live streaming this, Brett, are we? Not live streaming, but still lots of people will see it later, so we better say hello to all the people out there who are watching on the DVD or whatever it is that it's going to end up as. So there are all kinds of reasons, I think, why people might think to themselves, why would you love the church? What's that all about? One of the most obvious and, in a sense, most convincing reasons would be the terrible suffering which so many people who've been sexually abused by priests and religious and lay leaders in our church, including in our Catholic schools. One of the reasons why you think, why would you love the church when there have been people in the church who have done these terrible things and caused so much suffering? And that's a good question. And I'm certainly not here to explain that away or to pretend it's not as bad as it is. But I think we need to work our way through it and still ask ourselves, in spite of all of that, is the church an institution, a group of people that we could actually care about and maybe even love? We certainly can't afford to ever stop being very honest about this dark part of our history. And for many people today, both inside the church and outside the church, when they look at the church, all they see is that terrible story. So they would say to themselves, how could you even begin to talk about loving an institution which has caused so much suffering? So that's one reason, and I'm sure many of you will have heard people talking this way, and you may even feel a little bit like that yourselves. On top of this, of course, there are many people who see the church as a repressive institution in our society. And maybe some of you experience the church more in that way than in any other way. When people look at the church, many people, what they see is an institution which, as far as they're concerned, keeps on saying no to a whole lot of things. And particularly to a whole lot of things which the rest of society wants to say yes to. And we might talk about a few of them later on, but I'm sure you know what I'm getting at. It's particularly the case in relation to matters of sexual morality. We're all aware of that. But it also extends to other areas. Every year at Christmas time, for example, I seem to be asked by the media for the church's views on extending shopping hours so that people have more time to get their Christmas shopping done. And every year at Easter, which of course is just around the corner, I normally get asked whether or not the church is in favour of playing AFL footy on Good Friday. So I'm expecting that question to come in the next few weeks, and I'm busily thinking about how I'm going to respond to it. The headline in the evening news or in the next day's newspapers would normally be something like this: Catholic Church says no to this, that, or something else. Issues like extending shopping hours may not be at the top of most people's priorities, but things like same-sex marriage or allowing women to be ordained as priests, those sorts of questions might seem to be a little bit more important to lots of people. How can you love an institution which always seems to be saying no, always seems to be negative, always seems to be trying to limit our freedom? And as I'm saying these things, I'm thinking maybe there are quite a few of you here listening to me who have got these very questions in your minds as well. That's presuming you even think about the church, and perhaps for many of you it's not such a big deal in your lives at the moment, but it might become more of a big deal as time goes by. These are big questions, and maybe some of them will come up during our question and answer session later on this morning. You've probably seen Pope Francis doing some of these Q&A sessions. He's pretty good at it. Bishop Don and I aren't experts in this, but we'll certainly do our best. But what I wanted to suggest to you this morning is two things. First of all, it is important that those of us who, in spite of our limitations, are called to lead the church at this time, so that's people like Bishop Don and myself, it's people like your school principals and your teachers and the people involved in Catholic education, it's people like Diana Altieri, who has a very significant role in Catholic education here in WA, people like us who are called on to be leaders. In spite of our limitations, we need to listen to the questions and consider the ideas that are in the minds of people who in one way or another belong to or are concerned about the church. And in this year of youth, it's particularly important that we listen to people like you. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is this, and we might sort of follow this one through in the question and answer session. What I would want to say is that every no that the church comes up with is always built on a yes. It's because we say yes to things that we think are really important that sometimes we might have to say no to some things. So you might just keep that idea in mind. Every no is the result of a deeper and more significant yes. And we might talk about that a little bit later. There are a few difficulties in all of this, of course, and the first one is that because of what I said at the beginning of the talk, many people don't listen to the church's leaders very carefully or very sympathetically because of those dreadful failures of the past. And that's where the topic of my talk this morning comes from. That's why I phrased it the way I did. Love the church? You've got to be kidding. How could anybody love that institution? So it's not just because of the abuse issues, but it's because of these other things which make the church look like it's always negative when we're trying instead actually to be positive. So at the bottom line, I guess, is that what seem to be the church's no's, not no's, but no's, are actually built on the church's yeses. And that's not always easy to see and always easy to grasp, and not everyone will agree with the things we say yes to, but it's important for us to think that through. These are the sort of ideas that I would hope many of you would be able to take back and introduce into your RE classes and your RE discussions and really delve into some of these questions. I want to explain where all of this is coming from in my own thinking. It's time for personal confession. I was born in 1954. That's a long time ago, which means that I turned 64 earlier this year. When I was a teenager, when I was your age, someone who was in his 60s, I presumed was sort of useless at the end of everything, old and dottery and no energy and, thinking about the grave and all of that sort of stuff. I don't quite feel that way anymore now that I'm 64. I think it's maybe not as old as I used to think it was. And maybe by the time you get to my age, you'll still have 40 or 50 years ahead of you. Who knows? Science is making great advances. But anyway, like a lot of older people, I tend now to spend a bit more time than I used to looking back and thinking over my life's journey. I think it's a good thing to do at any age, and I often encourage people to do it, but I think as you get older, you're a bit more inclined to do it. One of the things that's very obvious to me as I think about all of this is that when I was at school, and I've got photos up there of the primary school that I went to, that little black and white photo. Things have changed a bit, haven't they, since those days when that's what a primary school looked like. And then the secondary school that I went to, Salesian College in Chadstone, which is at least a little bit more updated, maybe not quite as much as Arranmore College. But anyway, when I was going to primary school and then in secondary school, the values that I grew up with at home, so I come from an average Catholic family. We went to Mass every Sunday. We weren't fanatics about it, but it was just what we did. It was part of the weekly routine. The values that my mum and dad lived by were exactly the same as the values that I was being taught at school. And I imagine that that's still the case for most of you. But there's a big difference between then and now, in my opinion. And that is that when I was a kid growing up, the values at home and the values at school were pretty much exactly the same as the values in the rest of our society. And for that reason, the church's no's in those days were exactly the same as society's no's. So it wasn't that hard to hang on to your Christian understanding because it was generally the understanding of everybody else in this place where you happened to be living. So things like, for example, the sacredness of human life, and so at the bottom line was always that you protected human life no matter what. That wasn't just a Catholic teaching. It wasn't just something my mum and dad believed in. It was the way society operated. Or to be a little bit more challenging, I suppose, the basic understanding of what human sexuality was all about, that the church was on about, was pretty much the same as what society was on about. And you all know, and I know, that that's no longer the case. The kinds of things you might be learning at school about the value of human life, about what human sexuality is all about, all of those things, they're not exactly the same things that you'll be picking up by watching TV or hopping online and looking at all sorts of different things. So there's a conflict now, or a challenge, a sort of a confrontation almost, between two sets of values that there wasn't so much when I was growing up. So there was a fundamental consensus about what everybody needed to do, no matter what religion you were, what everybody needed to do to make our society work well for the sake of everybody. And of course, that fundamental consensus, that strong level of agreement, was actually based on the fact that what we might call modern Australia, or Australia after the European settlement, was built on what we often call the Judeo-Christian heritage. In other words, it was built on Christianity. Christianity came to Australia with the first European settlers. And generally speaking, we might say that the English brought Anglican Christianity and the Irish brought Catholic Christianity. But it was fundamentally Christian values which were the underpinning of our society. That's been the case until very recently. But now the values of our society are sort of separating themselves from those origins. As you all know, as Australia has developed since the first Europeans arrived, we've become a very multicultural and very multi-faith society. And you can see there up on the screen a couple of photos, one at Notre Dame University, where the chief rabbi of Western Australia is planting an olive tree, and I'm standing there watching him with one of the imams from the Muslim community. We were celebrating our common heritage as people who all look back to Abraham as one of the great figures of our faith. And then in the other photo, which is the opening of St John of God Hospital in Midland, the big new public hospital in Midland, we've similarly got the chief rabbi there, we've got myself, we've got a member of the Sikh community, we've got a few other representatives of different religions. So we now live in a very multicultural and multi-faith society. I was recently at a meeting of religious leaders to discuss the question of religious freedom, which is a big question these days in our society. And present at the meeting, I was there, of course, and so were members of other Christian churches, the Anglicans, the Uniting Church, many other Christian churches, but also representatives from the Jewish community, the Sikh community, the Buddhist community, the Muslim community, the Baha'i community, and other communities as well. You couldn't have got that group of people together a couple of hundred years ago here in Australia so easily. So the origins of so-called modern Australia, with its Judeo-Christian heritage, are now added to, if you like, by all of these other traditions which have come into the country and have enriched us. The fact is that our Christian origins do explain a great deal about the present structures of our society, including our legal structures, our moral frameworks, all of those kinds of things. And the danger is that as we kind of move away from those things which were the foundation stones, we may not have any other foundation stones in place, and therefore our society will begin to fragment. And I think there might be some evidence as we look around here in Perth and around the suburbs of Perth that our society is beginning to fragment. There are lots of problems, as we know, in our society at the moment. Maybe part of it is because we've sort of drifted from those solid foundations on which modern Australia was built. So all of this, why am I saying all of this? Because I think it invites all of us, and I think it particularly invites you at your stage of growth and development, to take up a consciously critical approach to our society, rather than an uncritical and unreflective approach. As new ideas emerge, new questions are asked, new values take the place of the old values, I think it's important that we don't only ask ourselves how we feel about these things, but what do I think about these things? Feelings, if you like, sort of bubble up from inside you. Thinking is a conscious, reflective, considered way of thinking about what's going on and making decisions about it. And that's really one of the messages that I wanted to give to you this morning, particularly those of you who are in the senior years at secondary school, or those who are coming up through not the infant school, the junior school and the middle school to your senior years. There's a phrase in the New Testament written by St. Paul, it's from one of his letters, and I've always been aware of it, but it sort of hit me more and more, and I'm going to share it with you. It's a very challenging phrase. And one of the things I want to ask you to do, encourage you to do, is take it back with you, and maybe together again in your RE classes or in other opportunities that you have, to think about just what this might be saying to you. So it comes from St. Paul's letter to the Romans. It takes a few readings to get it clear in your mind, but as long as you remember where you can find it, you can go back when you get back to school and have a look at it. Adapt yourselves no longer to the patterns of this present world. They'd have to think about that. What's he talking about when he talks about the patterns of this present world? He was talking about the world of 2,000 years ago. I think we can read it as the world of Western Australia in 2018. Adapt yourselves no longer to the patterns of this present world, but let your minds be remade. That's where the thinking bit comes in, as opposed to just the feeling bit. Let your minds be remade, and your whole nature, your whole way of thinking about things and living your life be transformed. Then, if you do that, you will be able to discern, you will be able to work out the will of God and to know what actually is good as opposed to bad, what is acceptable, worthwhile, something that you can commit yourself to, and what is perfect. So I said it's a challenging phrase, and I think it is. And it's not just for people like me who are in their 60s, it's also for people of your age. It's as relevant for you as it is for me, and as relevant for your life and your circle of friends and what happens in your home and what happens in your school and what happens amongst your mates as it is for anybody else. I don't think there are too many other passages in the New Testament that are as challenging as this one is, for us just as individual people, certainly for us as a community of Catholics or Christian people who are committed to following Jesus. So it's not going to be easy for us to work our way through it, but I think that's the challenge. I think what St. Paul is doing is challenging us to consider the possibility that many of the presumptions that operate in our world today, which means for us here in WA, in Perth, in my suburb, in my school, in my home, in my family, to challenge, or rather to consider the possibility that many of these presuppositions might not really be the kinds of presuppositions upon which God would like to see us building our lives and building our society. If we're not feeling a bit uncomfortable at the moment and not sort of wanting to squirm a little bit in our seats, then I'm not succeeding in getting my message across. Because this is a big question for each one of us. The way I think, the way I live my life, the decisions I make, the friends I make, the things I do with my friends, are these actually part of God's plan for me to be the person that God has created me to be? We might say that there are two meanings or two ways of thinking about this phrase. The first is what we might call a secular meaning, and the second is what we might call a religious meaning. And of course, St. Paul is on about the religious meaning, but I want to say just something a little first about what I might call the secular meaning. I think if we were going to put this in contemporary language, it might sound something like this. Don't let yourself be pushed and pulled unthinkingly by the general consensus you see all around you and which is presented to you by many of your friends, by the media, by politicians, and so on and so forth. Don't just let yourself uncritically get pushed around by all of these things. They may all be right, they may all be good, they might all be helpful, but then again, they might not. So be careful. Be critical, think hard, and only make decisions after you've really thought them through. Now, that's kind of pretty heavy, and it means we've got to sort of take our lives very seriously. And for you as young people, grab hold of your life and think, I'm the one in charge of this life. I'm not going to have anyone else tell me how to live it. I need to think hard about how I can be the person that I want to be, which in religious terms would be the person that God has created me to be. And that leads me to the religious dimension of this message, and that is that basically as religious people, or as people who are grappling with the possibility of faith, the fundamental conviction is that God is actually the creator of everything in the world, including us. And that God knew what he was doing when he created the world. The world is, although we've messed it up a bit, basically the way God wants it to be. His desire for the world, his plan for the world is sort of built in to the structure of the world as it is. And so in trying to understand what I'm supposed to be doing with my life and how I make sense of my life and how I construct a life that I'll be happy with from now until the end, we've got to think about these things. God has a part to play as we work through our understanding of what my life is supposed to be all about. The other thing, certainly for us as Catholics, and as I said before, most of us here in the auditorium this morning are Catholics. We're all involved in Catholic education, so whether we're Catholics or not, we're kind of being exposed to the Catholic way of thinking of things. Another dimension to all of this is that as Catholics, we believe that in Jesus Christ and in his church, because the church is the thing that Jesus set up and got started in the first place, in Jesus Christ and in his church, God has given us a way of working out what St. Paul was talking about when he said, you can work out what is good and acceptable and perfect. And in the end, that would be my answer to those who say to me, love the church, you've got to be joking. Because God has given us the church to help us. And if I can put it this way, all of us together, all of you, me, everybody, it's our job to help the church be the church God wants it to be, so it can actually be a place where we can go to understand what is right and what is good and what's going to make our lives more worthwhile. So yes, love the church, not because of its leaders, who might from time to time let us all down, sometimes very badly, but because the ideals which inspired those leaders to give their lives to the church in the first place are really important ideals. You all know how easy it is to have high ideals and struggle to live up to them in practice. So love the church not because of the leaders who mess it up sometimes, but because of the ideals which attracted them in the first place. Those ideals which we believe the church presents to us because that's what God is asking of us. Love the church not because its teachings never challenge us, so it's easy to be a Catholic or a Christian. Don't love the church because it's easy, but love the church because it calls us to be more than we are at the moment. It holds out an ideal to us and says, keep trying. Might be hard to get there, but keep trying. Don't give up on making yourself and letting other people help you to make yourself the best person you can possibly be. And the church, because it's given to us by God, is there to help you do that. Well, what has all this got to do with LifeLink? Because we're here to launch LifeLink as well as to think about all of these things. Well, I think you can think about LifeLink as another reason, if I can put it this way, to love the church. And a way of showing that we do love and value the church. Here in Western Australia, just like in the rest of Australia and all around the world, the church, for all its failings and all its mistakes, becomes exactly what God wants it to be when it sees people in need and does something about it. LifeLink provides all of us, through our support of those LifeLink agencies we heard about earlier, it provides us with the opportunity to say that whatever our politicians, for example, might think of migrants and refugees, our minds and our hearts, because we have no longer adapted ourselves to the patterns of this present world, we understand that those migrants and those refugees are our brothers and sisters, that together we're all children of God and every single one of us is deserving of respect. Our support of LifeLink agencies allows us to say that because our minds are being reshaped, we now think like Christ. So that when we encounter people who are hungry or out of work or suffering mental illness, we don't start criticising them. We don't start judging them for what we might think of their poor lifestyle choices. We just want to give them something to eat. We just want to make sure they've got clothes to keep them warm in the cold weather. We just want to make sure they've got a roof to live under. That's what it means to adapt ourselves no longer to the patterns of the world in which we live, but to think the way Jesus thinks. I could go on with hundreds of these examples, but I'm sure you know what I'm getting at. And so I really hope that your school community, and you as the representatives who are here today, that you and your school community will really get behind whatever efforts you can come up with locally to help raise money to keep all of those great agencies that we saw a little earlier, keep them on the road. I said at the start of this talk that I would come back to the year of youth and share some thoughts with you about why it's so important. Well, we're running out of time. I can see Mr. Mendez getting a bit edgy down the back there. So I won't say too much about that. But what I can say is this. As the Archbishop, what I'm hoping is that for most of you, for all of you really, in whatever ways you can, and in whatever ways your school can help you to do this, you will find ways of sharing with me and with Bishop Don, maybe through your principal or your RE coordinators or other key people or the parish priests in your parishes. You'll find ways of sharing with us your experience of the church up until now. The good experiences and maybe the not so good experiences. Your hopes or your beliefs about what the church could be that it's not at the moment. And how the church can become a place where you feel at home and you feel as if you belong and you feel that you've got something to offer and people are going to listen and be grateful to hear from you. Let me finish by saying that as part of this desire I have to give reasons to you to make room for the church in your lives and to love the church, I made the decision, rather nervously I must admit, but I made the decision to commit the Archdiocese of Perth to hosting the next Australian Catholic Youth Festival, which will be in late November, early December of next year. Last year we had it in Sydney. Because it was 10 years since World Youth Day, it was a great big event, much bigger than it will be here. But we're hoping that maybe 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 young people from WA and from all across Australia will come here for this Australian Catholic Youth Festival at the end of 2019. I really want people from the rest of the country to come here and experience how alive and how vibrant and how hope-filled the church is here in WA. And I'm going to be relying on people like you to support the Youth Festival, to get behind it, to come along and be a part of it. So that's really the gist of my talk. And as I said, it's a bit heavy, I know, a lot of ideas in it. I hope you'll go home and think about it. It will be available on the web for you to have a look at if you want to go back and revisit parts of what I've said. But before I close, it is traditional for me to announce which schools are going to receive my Archbishop Spirit Award for last year's Lifelink Day. I think most of you know that the Spirit Award is not really based on how much money a school raises. Rather, it's presented to a school, and there's a list of criteria. I'll just quickly run through them. First of all, that demonstrates active support for the Lifelink Day initiative, that embraces the goals of Lifelink, pardon me, that is not only to learn about the church's response to people in need, but also to undertake some form of fundraising to support the agencies that we saw about a little earlier. It also includes committing the school community to helping students understand a little better their responsibility to care for those less fortunate in our community. That's part of this remaking of our minds, so that we don't just think about ourselves, we start to think about others. And part of that is to try and develop a spirit of compassion and caring in students, in teachers, in parents, and in the wider community. So on the screen, you're going to see the list of schools which have received my Spirit Award since it was first presented in 1999. So the thing is just going to scroll through, I think. Some of you will recognise your school there because some of you, your schools have won it in the past. And in 2016, I think that's right, yes, 2016, so that was, last year was announced the winners of 2016, and the two colleges, or the two schools that won last year were Mercy College in Kundula and St Helena's Primary School in Allenbrook. Every school in the Archdiocese, I'd have to say, I think is really deserving of receiving this award, because every school, I think without exception, gets involved in Lifelink Day in a really generous way. But you can't give an award to everybody, so Bishop Don and I have to sit down and make our decisions about who's going to get the award for last year's efforts. Before I announce the winners, and there are two winners this year as there often are, I just want to make mention of 4 schools which I think really did embrace all the aspects of Lifelink Day, organised lots of exciting and enjoyable events, and each of these deserves special recognition. So in the primary school area, I wanted to say a particular thank you to Xavier Catholic Primary School in Hilbert, to St Lawrence's Primary School in Balcatta, to St Joseph's in Southern Cross, which is a tiny little school out there in the wheat belt or in the goldfields, and they did a great job, and St Gerard's in Westminster. And for the secondary schools, 4 colleges that did exceptionally well were Mater Dei in Edgewater, La Salle College in Midland, Corpus Christi in Bateman, and Mercedes College in Perth. So congratulations to all of those schools, well done. This is one of those good news, bad news stories. It's good news to get your name mentioned as one of the people who gets a special mention, but it means you're probably not going to be the actual winner of the award. Anyway, that's the way these things work. So I want to announce, first of all, the award for the primary school that did a great job in 2017, and that's St Mary's School in Merredin. So let's give them a big round of applause. Congratulations. And again, another school out in the country, so not with a lot of resources, not with lots of people, but really got behind LifeLink and did a fantastic job. And the secondary school every secondary school did really well, but the secondary school that Bishop Don and I chose as the winner of the Spirit Award this time around is Seaton Catholic College in Samson. Where are they? Stand up so we can all see you and congratulate you. Don't be shy. Well done. And Bishop Don or I will come out to those schools at some stage as the year unfolds to make a formal presentation of the award. Bishop Sproxton and I really want to ask all of you to enthusiastically support our LifeLink Day initiative. It is really important for our Archdiocese. This year we're hoping to raise $130,000 through the secondary schools for people in need in the community. And so that's a big challenge. So I'm putting that challenge out there for you and ask you to get back to your schools, get enthusiastic, really get involved, and let's see what we can achieve together. Not for ourselves, but of course for the people who are so much in need in our society. So I want to, with those words, officially launch LifeLink Day for 2018 and just ask the Lord now to be with us and bless us, because in the end, as Christians, we believe that on our own we can't necessarily achieve a great deal, but if we allow the Spirit of God to work with us and in us, then we can achieve enormous things. So let's just pause for a moment. We're very conscious that we're here in the name of Jesus. He's here with us. Let's ask Him to be with us, inspire us, and strengthen us in our efforts for LifeLink Day. And because we do need the Lord's help and the Lord's blessing, in His name I now pray a prayer of blessing on all of us. Loving God, we thank You for all the gifts You give to us. We thank You first of all for the gift of the life that we have, a life so full of promise, with so many opportunities ahead of us. We ask You to be with us and help us to make the most of all the gifts You give us. We're conscious, however, of so many people who are struggling in different ways to realise the potential that is theirs. And so we ask You now to bless us and to help us so that through us and our efforts, the LifeLink agencies can reach out to these people and give them a sense of hope for the future. And so may Almighty God bless you all in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. So thank you to you all, to our principals, to our teachers, and especially to our students as you embark on your LifeLink Day for 2018. Thanks a lot. I'm now going to invite Mrs. Diana Altieri, who is the team leader for religious education and faith formation in Catholic Education WA, who's representing Dr. Deborah Sace, who is up in Broome at the moment, asked Diana to address us now. Thank you.
Thank you, Archbishop. And on behalf of the Acting Executive Director, Deborah Sace, I really want to thank the bishops for making the time to be with us today. And I want to thank all of you who are here representing your schools today. Dr. Sace wants me to express how proud all of us in Catholic education are for the generosity and passion you have for supporting those less fortunate than yourselves, especially in this Archdiocese. In this year of youth, we older Catholics, and the bishops and myself are all over 60, so we are older Catholics, but we have great hope for the future of our society because of young people such as you, who follow Jesus and open your hearts in service to create a better world. This Sunday is Palm Sunday. It's the beginning of Holy Week. It's a very sacred time of the year. It's a time when Christians commemorate and remember the last week of Jesus' life on earth. Next Thursday is Holy Thursday, and it begins what we call the Easter Triduum in the Catholic Church, the special 3 days that lead up to the resurrection of Jesus, when we commemorate his suffering and death before his resurrection. On Holy Thursday, we remember that Jesus commissioned all of his disciples, that is, all Christians, including us, to love one another. He said to his disciples, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another even as I have loved you, that you also love one another." And Jesus demonstrated his love through the action of washing the feet of his disciples. And next week, during Holy Week, we'll see Pope Francis doing the same thing. If you go to one of our parishes, you'll see our priests and our bishops doing the same thing, washing the feet of people to show this love in action. It was an act of humble service that Jesus performed. It was usually performed by a slave. In washing their feet, Jesus sums up what a life of service to God looks like. Jesus tells his disciples, "I have given you a model to follow, so that I have done for you, you should also do." This model that Jesus has given us is one that sets the bar very high. And Pope Francis, when he was talking to young people in July 2016 in a World Youth Day vigil, he challenged young people at that assembly to follow this model. And this is what he said to them: "My friends, Jesus is the Lord of risk. He is the Lord of the eternal more. Jesus is not the Lord of comfort, security, and ease. Following Jesus demands a good dose of courage, a readiness to trade in the sofa for a pair of walking shoes, and to set out on new and uncharted paths, to blaze trails that open up new horizons capable of spreading joy, born of God's love and wells up in your hearts with every act of mercy. To take the path of the craziness of our God, who teaches us to encounter him in the hungry, the thirsty, the naked, the sick, the friend in trouble, the prisoner, the refugee and the migrant, and our neighbours who feel abandoned. To take the path of our God, who encourages us to be politicians, thinkers, social activists." So very challenging words from Pope Francis. But all of us here, we encourage you young people to take the path of craziness that Pope Francis spoke of. We encourage you to pray, to participate in the Holy Week liturgies next week, and reflect on the contribution that you and each one of your schools can make to show love in action to those in need in the community. We want you to go back to your schools as ambassadors for LifeLink. Spread the word and accept the challenge to fundraise even greater amounts this year. We would make Mr. Mendez very happy if we can break the record this year, so that we together in the Perth Archdiocese can demonstrate how the Church is a sign of God's love and service to the world. Thank you.